Birmingham, 1856. A respectable parlour. Emerald wallpaper, newly applied. Fashionable, expensive, modern. Within 6 months, the lady of the house reports burning eyes, headaches that will not cease, a throat that feels scorched. Her husband suffers identically. Even their parrot begins to droop. They flee to the seaside. The symptoms vanish. They return home. The sickness returns. Something in that house is hunting them. I am Mr. Ravenhurst, and tonight we venture into the most dangerous room in Victorian England. Not the factory floor, where machinery devoured limbs, not the workhouse where cholera festered, not even the slums, where typhoid claimed thousands. No, the parlour, the drawing room, the very heart of domestic bliss. For the Victorians cherished their homes above all else. They filled them with wonders, gaslight, manufactured goods, wallpapers in colours their grandparents could never have imagined. They called their homes safe as houses. They had no idea they were sleeping inside slow-motion coffins. London, May 1851. The Crystal Palace opens to a nation hungry for modernity. Inside its iron and glass cathedral, Britain displays the spoils of empire: steam engines, textiles, porcelain, and wallpaper, hundreds upon hundreds of patterns. The crowds are mesmerised. For the first time in human history, ordinary people possess something their ancestors never imagined: artificial light. Not candles that flicker and fade, not oil lamps that smoke and sputter. Gaslight, steady, bright, constant, and with light came hunger for colour. The Georgian whites, those restrained classical walls that spoke of Enlightenment restraint, were banished overnight. The Victorians wanted richness. They wanted drama. They wanted walls that announced wealth. Above all, they wanted green. Cassell's Household Guide, that Bible of middle-class aspiration, declared green a colour of repose. The eye, it claimed, experiences a healthy and peculiarly grateful impression from this shade. Yellow-red, by contrast, the preference of impetuous, robust men. And savage nations, subtle. Between 1834 and 1874, wallpaper production in Britain exploded. From 1 million rolls annually to 32 million. 32 million rolls of paper, covering parlours, bedrooms, nurseries, every surface the middle classes could afford. And the most fashionable shade, the shade that appeared in every respectable home, every artistic interior, every pre-Raphaelite painting: Sheila's green, that brilliant, luminous Christmas tree green that didn't fade, didn't dull, didn't disappoint. Perfect. Or so they believed. 1775. A Swedish chemist named Carl Wilhelm Scheele is experimenting with copper compounds in his apothecary in Köping. He mixes sodium carbonate solution, heated to near boiling, with arsenious oxide, stirs constantly as the arsenic dissolves, then adds copper sulfate. The reaction is immediate. A precipitate forms, brilliant green, unlike anything previously achieved. He filters it, dries the crystals, heats them gently. The colour intensifies. This is copper arsenite, cupric hydrogen arsenite to be precise, and it possesses qualities that will make it the most desired pigment of the century. It is vivid, truly vivid, not the muddy greens achieved by layering blue over yellow, not shades that fade within months. This green is stable. This green is brilliant. This green is permanent. Within decades, Scheele's green dominates European decoration, wallpapers, fabrics, paints, artificial flowers, children's toys, even confectionery. By the 1850s, one British manufacturer estimates that 100 million square metres of arsenical wallpaper exist in British homes alone. Another vendor, catering to the Christmas trade, uses 2 tons of Sheila's green pigment every single week. The Victorians are not fools. They know arsenic is poison. Every household keeps white arsenic powder for rats and mice. Murder by inheritance powder appears regularly in newspapers. But this is different. The arsenic is bound to copper. It's in the walls, not in food. You'd have to eat the wallpaper to be poisoned, surely. And who would eat wallpaper? What they don't understand, what they cannot understand without microscopy and chemistry decades away, is that arsenic doesn't need to be swallowed to kill. It merely needs humidity, warmth, and time. Birmingham, 1856. A respectable couple, name unrecorded, status preserved, apply fashionable green wallpaper to 2 rooms of their home. The pattern is modern. The colour is exact. The installation is professional. Within 1 week, both report symptoms: inflamed eyes, not pink irritation, deep inflammation, the kind that makes reading impossible, that makes gaslight unbearable, headaches, persistent, resistant to laudanum, building through the day until evening becomes torture, sore throats, not illness, not infection, a sensation of burning, of rawness, of tissue being slowly scorched. Even their parrot begins to droop. They consult their physician, Dr. Hines, a careful man, a rational man. He examines them thoroughly. No fever, no signs of cholera, that great Victorian terror, no evidence of infectious disease, but the symptoms persist, week after week. Then, exhausted and desperate, they make a decision. They will take the waters, the seaside, Brighton perhaps, or Scarborough, somewhere with clean air and salt wind. They depart. Within days, the symptoms vanish, eyes clear, headaches cease, throats heal, the parrot recovers. They return home, restored. The symptoms return. Now they suspect, now they investigate, and they make the connection that will begin unravelling the great arsenical wallpaper scandal of Victorian Britain. The wallpaper, it must be the wallpaper. They are not alone. 1858. The Lancet reports the death of a 3-year-old boy. The child lived in a nursery decorated with emerald green flock wallpaper. Flocked wallpaper. Textured. Fashionable. Expensive. The investigation afterward reveals that the entire room was covered in arsenical dust. The picture frames, the shelves, the toys. Every surface bears a fine coating of green powder. The child, naturally curious, had touched the walls, touched the toys, put his fingers in his mouth. He died of arsenical poisoning, slowly, agonizingly. The accounts multiply. A London surgeon, Dr. W., name discreetly abbreviated, purchases Sheila's green wallpaper for his home. 6 months later, his wife is dead. The physicians suspect arsenic. The wallpaper is removed, analysed, confirmed. Dr. Robert Brudenell Carter, Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, makes a grim declaration. He has reason to believe that 2 of his children died from arsenical wallpaper in their nursery. 2 children, a surgeon's children, in a surgeon's home. If medical professionals cannot protect their own families, who is safe? The pattern becomes clear to observers willing to see it. Families move into newly wallpapered homes. Within weeks, they fall ill. Children waste away in bright green nurseries. Ladies develop mysterious weaknesses. Servants complain of constant headaches, persistent nausea. But remove them from the house, symptoms improve. Return them, symptoms recur. The walls are killing them. But how? For decades, the mechanism remains mysterious. Yes, flocked wallpaper sheds dust. Children licking walls might ingest arsenic. But many victims never touch the walls. Many deaths occur in rooms where the wallpaper is smooth, intact, undisturbed. Something else is happening, something invisible. The answer arrives in 1891 from an Italian physician named Bartolomeo Gossio. Gossio is investigating a peculiar phenomenon. In certain homes, particularly damp homes, poorly ventilated homes, a strange smell develops. Garlic, unmistakable. But there is no garlic in these houses. The smell appears near wallpapered walls, particularly green wallpapered walls. Gossio conducts careful experiments. He takes samples of the mold growing in afflicted houses. He cultures them on potato mash mixed with arsenic oxide. The molds thrive, and they produce that smell, that distinctive garlic-like odour. More significantly, they produce gas. Gossio exposes a mouse to this gas. The mouse dies within seconds. Paralysis, nervous system collapse, death. Gossio has discovered the mechanism. The fungus is Scopulariopsis brevicalis, common, ubiquitous, harmless under normal circumstances. But in the presence of arsenical wallpaper, in damp conditions, this fungus performs a transformation. It feeds on the wallpaper paste, the starch, the cellulose, and as it metabolizes, it converts the copper arsenite in the wallpaper into something far more deadly. A volatile arsenic compound, a gas. Gossio incorrectly identifies it as diethylarsine. Later research, Frederick Challenger at the University of Leeds, 1932, correctly identifies the compound as trimethylarsine. The chemistry is complex. The effect is simple. The fungus transforms solid arsenic in wallpaper into airborne poison. Every breath delivers arsenic directly to the blood. Victorian homes are perfect incubators for this process. They are damp. Coal fires produce condensation. No central heating, no dehumidifiers. The air inside barely circulates. Windows stay closed against London's notorious smog, against cold, against the filth of industrial streets. Warmth, humidity, darkness, fungal growth. The transformation is constant, night after night, week after week. Invisible clouds of trimethylarsine accumulate in bedrooms, in nurseries, in parlours where families gather in evenings. They breathe it. Their children breathe it. The arsenic enters the bloodstream, accumulates in tissues, attacks the nervous system, the digestive tract, the liver. The symptoms are vague enough, headaches, nausea, weakness, that they resemble countless other Victorian ailments. Neurasthenia, nervous exhaustion, female hysteria, cholera. Doctors diagnose everything except the truth. The walls are exhaling poison. Now we arrive at the most disturbing element of this chronicle, the denial, the resistance, the men who knew the truth and chose profit over lives. At the centre, William Morris. Morris is venerated today as champion of handicraft, opponent of soulless industrialization, founder of the arts and crafts movement. His wallpapers hang in museums, his textiles fetch thousands at auction. His socialist writings inspire generations, but William Morris made his fortune from arsenic. Devon Great Consols, a copper mine near Tavistock in Devon. In 1844, a group of investors, including William Morris's father, William Morris Sr., leased the property from the Duke of Bedford for £1,024. The mine proves spectacularly profitable. Within 18 months, the original £1 shares are worth £800. When Morris Sr. dies in 1847, his estate, one of the wealthiest declared that year, is valued at £60,000. In modern terms, approximately £6 million. 2/3 of this wealth comes from Devon Great Consols. Young William Morris, then 13 years old, inherits this fortune. The shares, the dividends, the wealth that will fund his education, his marriage, his artistic ventures. Devon Great Consols makes William Morris rich. By the 1860s, the copper begins to exhaust. World prices fall. The mine faces decline. But the engineers discover something. The copper lodes are lined with arsenopyrite. Miss Pickle, the miners call it. Arsenic sulfide. Previously worthless waste. Now, opportunity. In 1867, Devon Great Consols pivots to arsenic production. The facilities expand to cover 8 acres. Processing, refining, packaging. By 1870, Devon Great Consols supplies half the world's arsenic. More than half of Britain's total arsenic output comes from this single mine, the largest arsenic producer in the world. And William Morris, by now a successful designer, a celebrated artist, joins the board of directors in 1871. Morris serves as director from 1871 to 1875, 4 years. 4 years during which Devon Great Consols produces thousands of tons of arsenic. Thousands of tons of arsenic that go into pigments. Pigments that go into wallpapers. Wallpapers that kill. And Morris's own company, Morris, Marshall, Faulkner and Company, later Morris and Company, produces wallpapers using arsenical greens. Professor Andy Mahag at the University of Aberdeen analysed early Morris wallpaper samples using X-ray fluorescence in 2003. The results? Significant quantities of arsenic, along with lead, chromium and mercury. The most beautiful wallpapers of the Victorian age were toxic. But here is what makes Morris's position indefensible. By the 1870s, the evidence is overwhelming. Medical journals document poisoning cases. The Lancet campaigns against arsenical wallpapers. Doctors testify. Families report. Children die. The connection is undeniable. Morris's response? Denial. Complete denial. In 1885, years after he has left the board, years after he has stopped using arsenical pigments in his designs, he writes to his friend Thomas Wardle, "As to the arsenic scare, a greater folly it is hardly possible to imagine. The doctors were bitten as people were bitten by the witch fever." Witch fever. He dismisses documented poisoning deaths as hysteria, as medical incompetence, as fashionable panic. He calls it a hoax. Consider what this means. Morris knows the arsenic supply chain intimately. He's been a director of the world's largest arsenic producer. He knows arsenical pigments go into wallpapers. He knows people are dying, and he calls it folly. Why? Partly conviction. Morris genuinely believes the danger is exaggerated. Many Victorian doctors do share his skepticism. The mechanisms aren't fully understood. The symptoms resemble other diseases. But partly economics. Devon Great Consols pays directors 100 guineas annually. By 1880, this increases to 500 guineas, approximately £25,000 in modern terms. Morris's arsenic investments have made him wealthy. His artistic freedom, his socialist activism, his ability to produce expensive handcrafted goods for wealthy clients, all funded by arsenic. Admitting the danger means admitting complicity. Morris cannot admit complicity. The turning point arrives from the very top. 1879. A visiting dignitary, likely diplomatic, identity discreetly unrecorded, stays overnight at Buckingham Palace. The following morning, he fails to appear for his scheduled meeting with Queen Victoria. This is problematic. One does not keep the Queen waiting. When staff investigate, they find him violently ill. Nausea, vomiting, weakness, unable to stand. The palace physicians attend. They examine the guest quarters, the bedrooms specifically. The wallpaper is green, fashionable emerald green. They test it. Arsenical. Victoria is, according to palace records, quite put out. Not by the illness particularly, but by the breach of protocol. The embarrassment of a guest falling ill under royal hospitality. She issues an order, immediate, non-negotiable. Every room in Buckingham Palace is to be stripped of green wallpaper. all of it, without exception. The work begins within days. When the newspapers report that the Queen herself has banned arsenical wallpaper from the royal residence, public opinion shifts. If Buckingham Palace isn't safe, is any house safe? Sales of green wallpapers collapse. Manufacturers, reading market signals rather than medical evidence, begin advertising arsenic-free wallpapers. By the 1880s, new pigments replace Scheele's green, zinc green, chromium oxide, safer alternatives that don't require acknowledging past deaths. The transition is economic, not moral. The British public, using the power of their wallets, accomplish what Parliament refused to legislate. Because, and this is critical, arsenical wallpaper is never officially banned in Britain. Never. The National Health Society drafts legislation in the 1880s requesting total prohibition of arsenic in household products. A physician member of Parliament receives it, reads it, and dismisses it. Parliament never debates it. No British law ever bans arsenic in wallpaper. The industry simply moves on, quietly, without admitting fault. How many died? We will never know. The symptoms of chronic arsenic poisoning mimic so many other Victorian ailments: wasting disease, nervous exhaustion, consumption, cholera. No Victorian death certificate reads killed by wallpaper, but we can estimate 100 million square metres of arsenical wallpaper in British homes by the 1850s. Professor Meharg's analysis shows that a typical Victorian drawing room, 100 square metres of wall space, could contain 2.5 kilograms of arsenic. 2.5 kilograms, enough to kill hundreds. And that's just one room. The nurseries with their bright green walls. The bedrooms where families slept. The parlours where they gathered. Hundreds of thousands of homes. Millions of people exposed. For decades. Arsenic is a Class 1 carcinogen. Chronic exposure causes cancer, organ failure, neurological damage. Even non-lethal doses cause permanent harm. The Victorian wallpaper industry killed more people than we can ever document. Killed them slowly, invisibly, while insisting the product was safe. And the cruelest element? The victims were told they were imagining it. Hysterical, weak, susceptible to fashionable panics. When they reported symptoms, when they connected their illness to their newly decorated homes, they were dismissed, even by doctors, even by the very men profiting from their suffering. Today, samples of Victorian arsenical wallpaper reside in museums, behind glass, with warnings: the Victoria and Albert Museum, the St. Louis Art Museum. Collections worldwide preserve these beautiful, deadly artifacts. Tested with X-ray fluorescence, they still registered dangerous levels of arsenic, still toxic 150 years later. The pigment doesn't degrade. The poison remains. William Morris's wallpapers hang in galleries, admired, studied, valued. But we know now what the Victorians couldn't see, that beneath the beauty was complicity, that the aesthetic movement was funded by poison, that progress and death were manufactured in the same facilities. The walls of the Victorian home were not safe as houses. They were slow-motion coffins, exhaling arsenic every night while families slept, trusting that their modern, scientific, progressive age would protect them. It didn't. The Emerald Deceiver claimed its victims in silence, and the men who knew, the directors, the manufacturers, the chemists, said nothing. Or worse, they called it witch fever. London, 1807. Pall Mall becomes the first street in the world to be illuminated by gaslight. The effect is transformative. For millennia, humanity has lived by the rhythm of the sun. When darkness falls, activity ceases. Work stops. Reading becomes difficult. Social life contracts to the small circle of candlelight or the uncertain flicker of oil lamps. But now there is light, constant, bright, controllable. Gas. William Murdoch, engineer, inventor, pioneer, has demonstrated that coal, when heated in the absence of air, releases a flammable vapor. Capture this vapor, pipe it through iron tubes, ignite it at controlled points, and you have the future. By the 1820s, gaslight illuminates London's major thoroughfares. Shops stay open later. Factories extend their working hours. The city, for the first time in human history, does not sleep. By the 1840s, gas reaches private homes. Middle-class parlours glow with gasoliers. Those magnificent chandeliers adapted for gas, their multiple burners producing light equivalent to dozens of candles. No more fumbling with matches. No more trimming wicks. No more smoke-blackened ceilings from tallow candles. Simply turn the valve. Light appears. This is progress. This is modernity. This is the Victorian age conquering darkness itself. The Victorians embrace gas with enthusiasm bordering on obsession. Theatres install elaborate gas lighting systems, hundreds of jets controlled by a single operator, capable of illuminating stages, dimming for effect, creating atmosphere impossible with candles. Hotels compete to offer the brightest, most modern facilities. Even churches install gas light, banishing centuries of dim, candle-lit devotion. And homes. Homes adopt gas as the ultimate symbol of respectability. To have gas is to be modern, to be enlightened, to have arrived. What they don't understand, what they cannot yet understand, is that they have invited something into their homes far more dangerous than the darkness they sought to banish. They have piped death directly into their parlours. Victorian coal gas, what they call town gas, is manufactured from coal through a process called destructive distillation. Heat coal to extreme temperatures in sealed retorts. The coal decomposes. Volatile compounds vaporize. Collect these vapors. Cool them. Purify them, partially, inadequately. What emerges is not a single substance but a cocktail, a lethal cocktail. Hydrogen, flammable, explosive when mixed with air. Methane, equally flammable, equally volatile. Sulfur compounds. These give coal gas its characteristic odour. That rotten egg smell the Victorians complain about. The smell that blackens their wallpaper, tarnishes their silver, corrodes their metal fixtures. And carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide comprises between 5 and 20% of coal gas, depending on the manufacturing process, the quality of coal, the efficiency of purification. 20%, 1/5 of what flows through Victorian gas pipes, is a poison so insidious, so perfectly designed to kill, that it seems almost malicious. Carbon monoxide is colourless, odourless when separated from the sulfur compounds that accompany it in coal gas. Tasteless. It binds to hemoglobin in blood with an affinity 200 times greater than oxygen. When you breathe carbon monoxide, your blood carries it throughout your body in preference to the oxygen you need to survive. Your cells suffocate, your brain starves, your heart struggles. The symptoms? Headache, dizziness, nausea, weakness, confusion, all easily mistaken for other Victorian ailments. Influenza, nervous exhaustion, female hysteria, overwork. At higher concentrations, loss of consciousness, seizures, death. And here is the perfect horror of it. Carbon monoxide does not announce itself. There is no warning, no alarm. One moment you are reading by gaslight in your comfortable parlour. The next, darkness. The image of the fainting Victorian lady, that cultural icon, that symbol of female fragility immortalised in countless illustrations, may have less to do with corsets and more to do with the air she breathes. In poorly ventilated rooms, with gas fixtures burning for hours, with inadequate flues, with small leaks accumulating, carbon monoxide builds, not enough to kill immediately, but enough to cause chronic symptoms, enough to weaken, enough to make Victorian life a slow, mysterious illness that doctors cannot diagnose and families cannot explain. They blame constitution, breeding, moral character, never the gas. Nowhere is gas more spectacular and more dangerous than in Victorian theatres. By the 1850s, nearly every theatre in Britain and America has converted to gas lighting. The advantages are undeniable. Brightness. Theatres can now illuminate stages with hundreds of jets, creating effects impossible with candles or oil lamps. Control. A single operator, the gas master, can adjust lighting throughout the building from a central panel, dimming for dramatic effect, brightening for visibility. Spectacle. Coloured glass shades create atmosphere. Footlights and border lights, those rows of jets along the stage, make actors visible from every seat. But the dangers multiply with every installation. Consider the mechanics. Border lights must be positioned close to stage scenery. Painted canvas, wood frames, fabric drops, all flammable. Wing lights stand in the wings themselves, surrounded by actors in costume, silk, wool, cotton, crinolines stiffened with wire, capable of catching fire and trapping the wearer. Footlights line the front of the stage, separated from the audience by nothing but air, and every single jet must be lit individually. The gas boy, usually a young man or teenager, walks along rows of jets with a flaming taper on a long pole. As he moves, gas escapes from jets not yet ignited. Gas accumulates, mixes with air, waits. One spark, one miscalculation, one gust of wind from an open door, and ignition. September 5th, 1887, Theatre Royal, Exeter. The evening performance of Romany Rye, a melodrama by Wilson Barrett, is underway. The theatre is packed, every seat sold, standing room crowded. Backstage, a gas jet sets fire to gauze scenery. The flames spread, rapidly. Canvas drops ignite. Wood frames catch. Paint, often mixed with flammable solvents, accelerates the fire. Smoke fills the theatre, thick, black, suffocating. The audience panics. The exits. There are too few, too narrow. Designed for an earlier era, before theatres regularly accommodated hundreds. No fireproof curtain separates stage from auditorium. The flames reach the seating area unimpeded. No adequate fire buckets. No hydrants with sufficient pressure. No organised response. 186 people die, most from smoke inhalation. Many crushed in the stampede for exits. Some burned. The investigation afterward reveals familiar patterns. Inadequate safety measures. Too few exits. Gas jets positioned too close to flammable materials. No proper ventilation. Cost cutting. Profit over safety. The theatre had been built cheaply, maintained inadequately, operated recklessly. Glasgow, 1884. The Star Theatre of Varieties, a music hall, working class entertainment, crowded, noisy, popular. During a performance, someone, James Turner, according to later testimony, shouts a single word: fire. There is no fire, no smoke, no danger. But the word alone is enough. Panic. Instantaneous. Absolute. The gallery empties. Hundreds surge toward the stairways. Too narrow, too steep, built to hold far fewer than currently occupy them. People fall, others pile on top. The weight becomes unbearable. When the stampede ends, 7 are dead. 14 seriously injured, crushed, suffocated. James Turner is charged with culpable homicide. The word he shouted, whether malicious prank or mistaken alarm, killed 7 people. But the deeper culpability lies with the theatre itself, with the insufficient exits, with the inadequate stairs, with the assumption that working-class lives matter less than construction costs. These are not isolated incidents. Between 1800 and the widespread adoption of electric lighting in the late 1800s, several hundred theatres burn in America and Europe. Hundreds. The Brighton Theatre, the Adelphi, Covent Garden, Twice, Drury Lane, multiple times throughout its history. Some fires kill dozens, others destroy only property, all share common causes: gas, flammable materials, inadequate safety measures, profit prioritized over protection, and always, the victims are blamed. Actors for standing too close to jets, audience members for panicking, gas boys for carelessness. Never the theatre owners who built inadequate exits. Never the companies that supplied volatile gas. Never the system that allowed such negligence. Theatres attract attention. Disasters involving hundreds make newspapers, inquests, investigations. But domestic gas accidents, these happen quietly, one family at a time, one house, one death. The newspapers report them briefly, a paragraph, sometimes merely a line. Gas explosion in Whitechapel. Family overcome by fumes in Shoreditch. Child burned in domestic accident. The accumulated toll, impossible to calculate, invisible, unrecorded, but the pattern is clear. The Victorian gas industry operates with minimal regulation. Multiple companies compete for customers. Competition drives innovation and negligence. Pipes are laid hastily. Workmanship is poor. Joints crack. Connections fail. Some failures result from accident, others from deliberate sabotage. Rival companies fracturing competitors' pipes to steal customers, to cause supply failures, to gain advantage. The result? Low pressure, inconsistent supply, and leaks. Gas accumulates in underground spaces, in cellars, in wall cavities, in enclosed rooms. One spark, one candle, one friction match struck carelessly. Explosion. August 1905. Lee, England. Alice Hudson, her sister Ellen, and the Beresford family share lodgings on Lee Road. An ordinary August day. Hot. Windows closed against afternoon heat. Gas accumulates, leaking from a faulty connection. Invisible. Undetected. Someone lights a match, or perhaps the gas reaches an open flame already burning. The explosion destroys the house. Walls collapse, windows shatter, furniture disintegrates. Ellen survives, badly injured but recovers. The Beresford family loses everything: home, possessions, income from lodgers. Alice dies on August 7th. The official verdict: accidental death. No investigation into the quality of gas supply. No inquiry into the company's maintenance standards. No compensation beyond a relief fund cobbled together by sympathetic neighbours. The gas company accepts no responsibility. January 1868. London's first traffic signal stands at the intersection of Bridge Street and Great George Street, outside Parliament. 20 feet tall, elaborate Gothic panelling, arms that rise and fall like a railway semaphore, and at night, gas lamps, red and green. A policeman, a constable whose name history has not preserved, operates the signal manually, changing lights as traffic requires. The hollow iron pillar fills with gas, a leak, undetected, accumulating. The explosion severely burns the constable's face. Some reports claim he dies from his injuries. Others suggest he survives but is permanently disfigured. The traffic signal is removed, never replaced at that location. London continues its traffic chaos for another 50 years before attempting mechanized control again. Notice the pattern. Theatre fires kill working-class audiences in gallery seating. The wealthy in boxes have better exits. Domestic explosions occur in poor neighbourhoods where pipe maintenance is inadequate, where complaints are ignored, where lives matter less. The constable operating a traffic signal, working class, replaceable, bears the consequence of a design flaw that could have been prevented. Meanwhile, gas company directors grow wealthy. Shareholders receive dividends, the industry expands, and the deaths, the injuries, the destroyed homes, accidental, unavoidable. The price of progress. The victims should have been more careful. But explosions, for all their horror, are not gas's most efficient method of killing. Fire is dramatic. Destruction is visible. Bodies are found. Inquests are held. Carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide kills quietly. A small leak. A poorly adjusted burner. Inadequate ventilation. A closed room on a cold winter night when windows stay shut against the chill. Gas burns. The flame appears normal, but incomplete combustion produces carbon monoxide, the invisible component of the flame, the part that does not burn away but escapes into the room. Hour after hour, night after night, the occupants breathe it, their blood carries it, their cells starve for oxygen, headaches become chronic, weakness becomes normal, nausea is attributed to bad food, bad constitution, bad luck. And then, one morning, they do not wake. Carbon monoxide poisoning produces a characteristic sign. The blood turns bright cherry red, carboxyhemoglobin, the compound formed when carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin. Victorian doctors sometimes recognize this. Sometimes. But often they attribute death to other causes. Natural causes, heart failure, respiratory failure, sudden death. The gas fixture in the bedroom. Coincidental, irrelevant. No one tests for carbon monoxide systematically. No one measures gas quality. No one monitors combustion efficiency. The industry insists gas is safe when properly used, when properly installed, when properly maintained, and when deaths occur, user error, carelessness, negligence by the victim. Winter makes it worse. Coal fires burn in grates, consuming oxygen. Gas fixtures burn throughout the house, consuming more oxygen. Windows stay closed, doors remain shut. Ventilation is minimal. The air becomes depleted. Oxygen levels drop. Carbon monoxide accumulates. The famous Victorian fainting spells, perhaps not entirely due to corsets or female delicacy. Perhaps women who spend more time indoors, who oversee households, who breathe gas-laden air day after day, are not weak but poisoned. Perhaps the chronic invalidism that afflicts so many Victorian families has less to do with constitution and more to do with the air in their fashionable gas-lit homes. We will never know the true toll. Victorian death certificates do not list carbon monoxide poisoning as cause of death. The condition is poorly understood. The testing is non-existent. Deaths attributed to heart failure, respiratory failure, natural causes in homes with gas lighting. How many were actually gas poisoning? Chronic illnesses, persistent weakness, the mysterious maladies that confined Victorian women to bed rest, that sent families to seaside resorts for fresh air that miraculously improved their health. Remove them from gas-lit homes, and symptoms vanish. Return them, and symptoms recur. But no one makes the connection systematically. No one investigates comprehensively. No one compels the industry to improve safety, because gas means progress. Gas means modernity. Gas means profit. And these things matter more than lives. 1814. The gasworks in Westminster explodes. The Royal Society, Britain's premier scientific institution, appoints a committee to investigate. Their findings: gasworks are dangerous. Safety standards are inadequate. Regulation is necessary. Parliament responds with recommendations, suggestions, no binding legislation, no enforcement mechanism, no penalties for negligence. The industry regulates itself, which is to say, not at all. The Victorian gas industry operates on competition and profit. Multiple companies serve the same areas. They undercut each other on price. They sabotage each other's infrastructure. They prioritize expansion over maintenance. Safety costs money. Proper pipe installation costs money. Regular inspection costs money. Quality control costs money. Deaths, apparently, cost nothing. When explosions occur, companies blame users. Carelessness, ignorance, failure to follow instructions. When carbon monoxide poisoning is diagnosed, companies blame ventilation, improper use, inadequate chimney maintenance, never the gas itself. never the system that delivers it, never the companies that profit from it. After the Theatre Royal fire in Exeter, inquests reveal negligence, inadequate exits, poor fire safety, gas fixtures positioned recklessly. Recommendations are made, changes are suggested. No one is criminally prosecuted. No theatre owner faces charges. No gas company is held liable. The families of the dead receive no compensation. The injured bear their own medical costs because it was an accident, an unfortunate accident, an unavoidable tragedy. The system itself is never questioned. Gas lighting remains dominant in Britain until the 1880s and 1890s, when electric lighting becomes practical and affordable. The transition is gradual. Some homes retain gas into the early 1900s. Some street lamps burn gas well into the 20th century. But eventually, gas retreats. Not because of regulation, not because of safety concerns, not because of the deaths, because something better arrived. Electric light, cleaner, brighter, safer. And so gas lighting fades into history, taking with it the explosions, the fires, the suffocations, but not the lessons, not the understanding that progress without safety is merely profitable negligence, not the recognition that industry, left to regulate itself, will always choose profit over protection. The Victorians piped gas into their homes believing they were conquering darkness. They were, but they were also inviting death. The invisible breath claimed its victims silently, efficiently, remorselessly. And the men who profited, the company directors, the shareholders, the politicians who refused to regulate, slept soundly in their well-lit homes, while others did not wake at all. London, 1860. A new invention promises to revolutionize motherhood. The baby bottle, not the simple vessel. Feeding bottles have existed for centuries. No, this is something different, something modern, something convenient, glass or earthenware, elegantly shaped. A long rubber tube, sometimes stretching 18 inches, connecting the bottle to a soft rubber nipple. The baby can feed itself. No need to hold the child constantly. No need to interrupt household management. No need to nurse in the awkward, uncomfortable position that corsets make nearly impossible. Simply fill the bottle, attach the tube, place the nipple in the infant's mouth, and walk away. The marketing is persuasive. Mummy's darling, little cherub, the Empire bottle, the Alexandria. Names that suggest modern motherhood, imperial respectability, scientific progress. For a Victorian woman, especially a middle-class woman, these bottles represent freedom. The freedom to manage her household efficiently. The freedom to maintain her appearance. The freedom from the primitive animal act of nursing that separates refined ladies from common wet nurses. And the experts endorse them. Medical journals carry advertisements. Household manuals discuss their use. Chemists stock them prominently. This is modernity. This is progress. This is the future. What mothers don't understand, what the manufacturers won't admit, is that they are purchasing death, not through malicious design, not through deliberate negligence, but death nonetheless, invisible, bacterial, inevitable. The Victorian baby bottle, this marvel of modern convenience, is a perfect killing machine, not by intention, by design. Consider the construction, the bottle itself, glass or earthenware, shaped like a banjo. That elegant slant makes it aesthetically pleasing, but functionally catastrophic. The bottom angles downward. Milk pools in the lowest corner. Impossible to see. Impossible to reach with a cloth. Impossible to verify clean. The neck, narrow. Designed to accept a cork or rubber stopper. But narrow necks mean limited access. A hand cannot fit inside. A brush barely reaches. Thorough cleaning requires disassembly, patience, tools, and the rubber. The rubber. The rubber tube and nipple are made from natural rubber, caoutchouc or gutta percha. Soft, flexible, perfect for infant mouths, and porous, microscopically porous. Milk doesn't just coat the surface, it seeps in, penetrates, becomes part of the material itself. Bacteria don't just sit on the rubber, they burrow, multiply, thrive. Washing removes surface contamination. But the bacteria embedded in the material, they remain, protected, reproducing. Each feeding adds more milk, more bacteria, more contamination. Within hours, not days, hours, the tube becomes a bacterial incubator. E. coli, Salmonella, Streptococcus, every pathogen that thrives in warm milk. And the 18-inch tube provides perfect conditions. Enclosed, moist, nutrient-rich, warm from the milk, cool enough to prevent pasteurization. A perfect breeding ground. Summer makes it worse. Victorian homes have no refrigeration. Milk sits at room temperature. In summer heat, 75, 80, 85 degrees Fahrenheit, bacterial growth accelerates exponentially. A bottle prepared in the morning, left sitting on a table. The baby feeds periodically throughout the day. By afternoon, the milk has spoiled. By evening, it's toxic. The mother doesn't know. The milk looks fine, smells, perhaps a bit off, but milk does that in summer. She offers the bottle again. The baby drinks. The bacteria enter the digestive system. Toxins accumulate. Inflammation begins. Diarrhea, vomiting, fever, summer complaint. The manufacturers claim the bottles are hygienic, modern, scientific. They are none of these things, but it's not entirely the manufacturer's fault. The problem is, how do you clean something designed to be uncleansable? Victorian households lack running water. Cleaning means filling a basin, heating water on a stove, using soap, if you have it, if you can afford it. Sterilization. The germ theory of disease is still controversial in the 1860s and 1870s. Pasteur's work is recent. Lister's antiseptic techniques are just being introduced to surgery. The concept that invisible organisms cause disease is radical, not yet accepted by everyone, not yet understood by most mothers. Mrs. Beeton, Isabella Beeton, that authority on Victorian household management, does provide instructions. Her book of household management, published in 1861, includes detailed guidance on bottle feeding. She recommends the nursing bottle should be thoroughly washed and cleaned every day and always rinsed out before and after using it, the warm water being squeezed through the nipple to wash out any particles of food that might lodge in the aperture. Victorian London daily washing. Water squeezed through the nipple. Rinsing before and after use. This is actually reasonable advice for the era. But there's a critical problem. Mrs. Beeton also states, when once properly adjusted, the nipple need never be removed till replaced by a new one, which will hardly be necessary oftener than once a fortnight. The nipple stays attached for 2 weeks, never removed. Daily washing means squeezing water through it, but never disassembling, never scrubbing the interior, never verifying the rubber itself is clean, because removing it is inconvenient, requires retying, might damage the delicate rubber, and that is the fatal flaw. Squeezing water through contaminated rubber doesn't sterilize it. It barely cleans it. The surface might rinse, but the bacteria embedded in the porous material, untouched, protected, multiplying. Day 1, A few bacteria penetrate the rubber. Day 3. Colonies form inside the material. Day 7. The entire nipple is contaminated throughout. Day 14. Replacement time. Finally, a new nipple. Clean. For now. And the cycle begins again. Even mothers following Mrs. Beaton's instructions carefully, washing daily, rinsing thoroughly, cannot prevent bacterial contamination. The design makes it impossible. They call it summer complaint. Every year, predictably, when the weather turns hot, infants begin to die. Diarrhea, vomiting, high fever, convulsions, rapid deterioration. A healthy child in the morning, violently ill by afternoon, dead within 48 hours. The official medical term is cholera infantum, but everyone knows it as summer complaint, the disease of the season. Doctors don't understand why it happens. They theorize, debate, publish papers. Some blame the heat itself. Perhaps infants' constitutions cannot withstand summer temperatures. Others suggest overfeeding, bad air, miasma, moral deficiency in the mother. A few suspect the milk, but they focus on cow's milk quality, whether it should be boiled, how it should be diluted. The bottles, those modern, scientific, hygienic bottles, rarely questioned. The pattern is undeniable to anyone paying attention. Bottle-fed babies die at vastly higher rates than breastfed babies. Urban babies, where bottle feeding is more common, die more frequently than rural babies. Summer deaths spike when heat accelerates bacterial growth in milk. Between 1855 and 1880, infant mortality in England and Wales averages 140 to 160 deaths per 1,000 births, 14 to 16%. In urban industrial areas, places like Stoke-upon-Trent, the rate climbs to 180, sometimes 220 per 1,000. Nearly 1 in 4. Approximately 1 in 6 children dies before their first birthday in 1840. And summer complaint is a leading cause. The mechanism, understood decades later, is simple. Bacteria, E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella, and others, thrive in warm milk. The long rubber tubes and unwashed nipples provide perfect breeding grounds. The baby drinks. Bacteria enter the digestive system. Toxins damage the intestinal lining. Diarrhea begins, severe, watery, constant. Dehydration follows. For a small infant, weighing perhaps 10 or 15 pounds, losing even 10% of body weight to fluid loss is catastrophic. The heart struggles, the brain suffers, organs fail. Death within 48 hours, sometimes faster. Studies in the early 1900s, looking back at Victorian data, reveal the truth. Women who breastfed rarely had infants who contracted summer complaint. Bottle-fed infants were far more likely to develop the disease during summer months. The evidence is overwhelming, undeniable, but in the Victorian era, ignored. Because admitting the truth would require admitting that modern scientific progress was killing babies, and that cannot be acknowledged. The deaths are not distributed equally. They never are. Wealthy Victorian families can afford wet nurses, healthy, well-nourished women whose sole job is infant care. Their babies are breastfed. Their survival rates are significantly better. The upper classes largely avoid murder bottles. Middle-class families, aspiring to gentility, imitating aristocratic refinement, desperate to demonstrate respectability, embrace bottle feeding enthusiastically. They can afford the bottles, the formula, the appearance of modernity, but they cannot afford wet nurses, and breastfeeding is common, primitive, something servants do. So they buy the bottles, follow the instructions, trust the manufacturers, and bury their babies. And working-class mothers, they have no choice. They must work. Factories don't provide nurseries. Employers don't allow breaks for nursing. Wages require full-day labour. The bottle is not a convenience, it's a necessity. The cheapest bottles, the simplest formula, often just cow's milk and water, sometimes thickened with flour. No wet nurses, no leisure for proper cleaning, no time for anything except survival. Their babies die at the highest rates, not because these mothers care less, not because they're less capable, but because poverty compounds every risk, amplifies every danger. The bottle that kills a middle-class infant quickly kills a working-class infant faster. The manufacturers bear no responsibility. When babies die, it's blamed on the mother. Improper preparation, insufficient care, negligence, ignorance, never the product itself. The companies continue advertising, continue selling, continue profiting. No regulations, no recalls, no investigations, because infant mortality, even at 15%, is normal, expected, an unfortunate reality of life. Progress marches on, and the babies are left behind. 1894, Allen and Hambry, a London pharmaceutical company, introduces a revolutionary design, the double-ended feeder, also called the banana bottle for its distinctive curved shape. No long rubber tube, no narrow neck, no inaccessible corners. Instead, a glass bottle with two openings, one end for a rubber teat, the other for a removable valve. Both components can be removed completely. The entire bottle can be disassembled, washed thoroughly, scrubbed, inspected, verified clean. The valve allows air to enter as the baby sucks, maintaining steady flow without the 18-inch death tube. They market it as most easily cleansed, the hygienic bottle. And it works. Babies fed from these bottles survive at significantly higher rates. The difference is dramatic. Competitors copy the design. By 1900, improved versions, like the Allenbury feeder, become standard. The banana bottle remains popular until the 1950s. Finally, a safe bottle, a genuinely modern solution. Progress at last, that doesn't kill. But here's the unbearable reality. The old bottles, the murder bottles, continue to sell, well into the 20th century. Despite the safer alternative being available, despite doctors condemning the old design, despite the deaths. Why? They're cheaper, familiar, already owned, and the manufacturers keep producing them. Because demand exists, because profit matters, the improved bottle exists, the solution is available, but it takes decades for the dangerous version to disappear completely from the market. How many babies died in those decades? Babies who could have survived with a simple design change? We'll never know. But every single one is a failure, a preventable death, a child sacrificed to convenience and profit. The Victorian baby bottle, that elegant, modern, convenient device, was engineered death, not through malice, not through ignorance alone, but through the toxic combination of flawed design, incomplete understanding of bacteria, profit-driven manufacturing, and cultural investment in the appearance of progress. The bottles promised to free Victorian mothers from primitive breastfeeding. Instead, they freed Victorian infants from life itself. The manufacturers, knowing the dangers by the 1870s, continued production for profit. The medical establishment, publishing warnings, was ignored because convenience triumphed over caution. The mothers, following instructions, using modern products, trusting experts, never understood why their babies died. They blamed themselves, their milk, their constitution, their failure as mothers. Never the bottle, never the system that sold them death disguised as progress. Between 1860 and 1900, hundreds of thousands of British infants died from contaminated bottle feeding. Exact numbers are impossible to calculate. Death certificates list symptoms, not causes. Diarrhea, summer complaint, failure to thrive. But the pattern is clear in the statistics. Bottle-fed babies died at rates 3 to 4 times higher than breastfed babies. Summer deaths spiked when bottles became bacterial incubators. Urban areas with widespread bottle use had catastrophic infant mortality. And it was preventable, not through advanced medicine, not through scientific breakthroughs, through simple design changes, available by 1894, through understanding bacteria, known since the 1860s, through prioritizing infant survival over manufacturing profit. But that would have required acknowledging that Victorian modernity was killing children. And such acknowledgement, unthinkable. Better to blame the mothers, better to accept the deaths as natural, better to maintain the illusion of progress, even as that progress filled cemeteries with tiny graves. A Victorian home, 1880, fashionable, modern, respectable. The parlour walls glow with emerald green, Sheila's green, the most popular shade, purchased at considerable expense because fashion demands it. Gas fixtures illuminate every room. No more fumbling with candles, no more primitive oil lamps. Just turn the valve and light appears. Civilized, scientific, advanced. In the nursery, a glass baby bottle sits ready. The latest design from a reputable manufacturer. The rubber tube attached, the nipple prepared. Convenient, hygienic, modern. This is progress. This is the Victorian ideal. This is a death trap. 3 hidden killers. 3 manifestations of the same fundamental problem. The walls poison slowly. Arsenical dust falling with each brush of fabric, each gust of wind. Copper arsenite leaching into the air when dampness releases trimethylarsine gas. The family breathes it, absorbs it, sickens gradually, mysteriously. The air suffocates invisibly. Carbon monoxide seeping from poorly adjusted burners, from small leaks in pipes, from incomplete combustion in poorly ventilated rooms. Headaches, weakness, confusion, death in sleep, painless but irreversible. The bottle breeds death in rubber tubes, bacteria multiplying in porous material, in milk left warm, in narrow necks impossible to clean. Infants drinking contamination, dying of summer complaint, dying of modernity. 3 dangers, 1 pattern. Convenience valued over safety, profit prioritized over protection, appearance elevated above reality. And when the deaths occurred, when families sickened, when babies died, when explosions destroyed, the victims were blamed. The wallpaper deaths? The homeowners should have chosen different colours, should have ventilated better, should have been less sensitive. Never mind that the manufacturers knew arsenic was poisonous. Never mind that the pigment was unnecessary. Alternatives existed. Never mind that the industry fought every regulation, every restriction, every attempt at transparency. The gas explosions. The victims should have been more careful, should have checked for leaks, should have maintained their fixtures better. Never mind that the gas companies prioritized expansion over maintenance. Never mind that competition led to sabotage, to cut corners, to inadequate pressure and fractured pipes. Never mind that working-class neighbourhoods received the worst service and suffered the highest casualties. The bottle deaths. The mothers should have been more diligent, should have cleaned more thoroughly, should have breastfed instead. Never mind that the bottle design made adequate cleaning impossible. Never mind that manufacturers continued selling deadly designs for decades after safer alternatives existed. Never mind that working-class mothers had no choice, no time, no resources for anything except survival. The pattern repeats. The victims are blamed. The system continues unchanged. Because acknowledging the truth would require acknowledging something far more uncomfortable than individual negligence. It would require acknowledging that progress itself was killing people. The Victorian age was an age of miracles. Railways spanned continents. Steamships crossed oceans. Telegraphs transmitted messages instantly across thousands of miles. Photography captured moments. Anesthesia eliminated surgical pain. Industrialization created wealth beyond previous imagination. Progress seemed inevitable, unstoppable, divinely ordained. But every miracle had a cost. The railways were built by laborers who died by the thousands. Cave-ins, explosions, exhaustion. Their deaths were acceptable, the price of progress. The factories produced unprecedented wealth while workers breathed toxic fumes, lost limbs to machinery, died young of occupational diseases. Acceptable losses, necessary sacrifices. The cities grew magnificent. Gaslit boulevards, grand department stores, imposing public buildings, built on slums where cholera and typhoid raged, where infant mortality exceeded 50%, where life expectancy for the poor was half that of the wealthy. And the homes. The respectable middle-class homes where Victorian families pursued domestic perfection. They were lined with poison, filled with explosive gas, stocked with bacteria-breeding bottles. But these deaths were inconvenient. They undermined the narrative of progress. They suggested that modernity might not be entirely beneficial, so they were ignored, minimized, blamed on individual failing rather than systemic design. The cost of progress was paid in bodies, and the Victorians simply refused to count them. Eventually, change came, not through regulation, not through corporate responsibility, not through moral awakening, through replacement. Arsenic wallpaper disappeared, not because it was banned, but because synthetic dyes made other colours equally vibrant and cheaper to produce. The deaths became unnecessary for profit. Gas lighting was replaced not because it was dangerous, but because electricity was brighter, cleaner, more efficient. The deaths became obsolete. Murder bottles were abandoned, not because manufacturers stopped making them, but because consumers eventually recognized the danger, and safer alternatives became affordable. In each case, the change came decades after it could have, should have. How many lives were lost in those decades? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. We'll never know precisely. Victorian statistics didn't track these deaths as categories. They were scattered across respiratory failure, mysterious illness, infant mortality, accidental death. But we know this. Every single one was preventable, not through advanced technology, not through medical breakthroughs, through simple changes, available at the time, rejected for profit. We look back at the Victorians with incredulity. How could they paper their walls with poison? How could they pipe explosive gas into every room? How could they feed their babies from bacteria-breeding bottles? How could they not see the danger? But they did see it. Some of them. Doctors warned, scientists studied, victims testified. They saw, they knew. They simply valued other things more. Profit, convenience, the appearance of modernity, the maintenance of economic systems that benefited the wealthy at the expense of the vulnerable. And if that sounds familiar, it should. We make the same calculations today, different dangers, same patterns. We know that climate change threatens millions. We continue fossil fuel consumption. We know that certain food additives may be harmful. We prioritize shelf life and convenience. We know that some manufacturing processes poison workers and communities. We prioritize cheap production. We are, in this regard, no different than the Victorians papering their walls with arsenic. We know. We choose convenience anyway. We blame victims when the costs become visible, and we call it progress. The Victorian home, that monument to progress, that temple of domestic perfection, was a beautiful lie. Beautiful wallpaper that poisoned, beautiful gaslight that exploded, beautiful bottles that killed. The beauty was real. The danger was real. Both could be true simultaneously. And that, perhaps, is the real lesson of the poisoned parlour. Progress is not inherently good. Modernity is not automatically safe. New is not synonymous with better. Every advancement carries costs. The question is not whether costs exist, but who pays them. In Victorian Britain, the costs were paid by children breathing arsenical dust, by families sleeping in carbon monoxide, by infants drinking from contaminated bottles. They paid with chronic illness, with shortened lives, with deaths that came too early, too painfully, too unnecessarily. And the people who profited, the manufacturers who sold the wallpaper, the gas, the bottles, they paid nothing, bore no responsibility, faced no consequences. They simply moved on to the next product, the next innovation, the next promise of progress, leaving behind, in parlours and nurseries and cemeteries across Britain, the evidence of what progress really costs, when no one is counting. The emerald walls still gleam in museum collections, preserved carefully now, behind glass, labelled toxic. The gas fixtures have become antiques, decorative, disconnected from their deadly purpose. The murder bottles sit in medical museums, curiosities, evidence of a more primitive time. We call it history. We call it cautionary. We call it the past. As if we've learned the lesson. As if we've stopped trading safety for convenience. As if we've stopped letting the vulnerable pay the costs of progress. We haven't. We've simply moved on to different poisons, different dangers, different victims. The pattern continues. And the parlours are still poisoned. We've just stopped looking at the walls.